Felicia.
EC Chairman, Plateau State, you are most welcome. Also among us is the representative of the Speaker, Plateau State House of Assembly, who is ably represented by Honorable Saleh Yimong. You are most welcome. We also have among us Honorable Namlong Daniel, the Majority Leader, member representing Maiden State Constituency. You are most welcome. Among us are some members of the Plateau State Executive Council. You are most welcome. Also among us is the Honorable Chief Justice of the two states, who is ably represented by Honorable Justice Ishaku Konda. You are most welcome. Also with us is General Eloy Oyenucha Erabo, the Chief of the Staff and Chairman Board of Governors, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, ably represented by the General Officer Commanding 3 Armored Division and Commander Operation Safe Rebels, Major General A.B. Ibrahim. You are most welcome. As the Excellency, the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, the Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger, join us in this gathering. You are most welcome, sir. A round of applause, His Excellency. While we are still standing, we will take the national anthem. Professor Professor of Environmental Sustainability, the Director General, National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. His Royal Majesty, Elder Jacob Gian, Commander of the Order of Niger, the Kongdom Jos, and Chairman of Plateau State Council of Chiefs and Emirs. Former Inspector General of Police, Mohammed Abubakar, the President, Alumni Association of National Institutes, ably represented by Ambassador Emmanuel B. Okafor, MNI. Accompanying is also Dr. Babatunde Kayode, MNI, Assistant Secretary General, ANI. We also have among us the Controller of Correction, Plateau State Command, Director Department of State Services, the Zonal Commander, Federal Road Safety Corps, the Controller, Nigerian Immigration Service, the Area Controller, Nigerian Customs Service, Plateau National and Benue State Command, ably represented by Assistant Controller Mohammed Sule, the Director, Secretary and Acquisition, Brigadier General CFJ Udaya, MNI, the Director of Studies, Professor Fumi Paramala, MNI, the Institute Librarian, Dr. Emmanuel Sambu Mama, members of the writing staff, members of the Research Directorate, the Chairman Trade Union Congress Plateau States, Comrade Kenneth Chamaki, the Chairman Academic Staff Union Unijos Chapter, ably represented by Professor Christopher Yilgan, who is the Vice Chairman, the Group Managing Director, NASCO, Group of Companies, ably represented by Mr. Stephen Adetolu, distinguished participants of Senior Executive Course 45 2023, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I have the singular honor and privilege to welcome you to the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, KURU. Today marks the beginning of the Maiden Policy Making and Good Governance Lecture Series. Your Excellency, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, on occasions such as this, when we have a high-profile personality, I mean a very important personality, it is customary and expedient for participants of Senior Executive Course 45 2023 to introduce themselves. With the kind permission of the Director General, the participants will now introduce themselves, starting with the Monitor General. Participants.
I am Colonel Ibrahim Yusuf, the Monitor General of Senior Executive Course 45 of 2023, sponsored by the Nigerian Army.
I am Abdullahi Al-Bakuri, FSI, Director sponsored by Department of State Services and Vice Chairman Study Group 1.
I am Captain Ayabu Daraka, Director from Nigeria Safety Investigation Bureau, sponsored by Federal Ministry of Aviation.
I am Aminu Sani Gadaya, private legal practitioner, sponsored by the Nigerian Bar Association.
I am Dr. Ozile, sponsored by National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies.
A director sponsored by the National Council of Women Societies.
I am Umar Usman Bukemeka, director sponsored by the President.
I am Navy Captain Bishara Medina Shodebo, the Welfare Officer for the Senior Executive Force, sponsored by the Nigerian Navy.
Honorable Agunsoye Roti, House of Reps, sponsored by the Presidency.
My name is Ibeku Edlegos Celeste, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by the state government. I am Commissioner of Police, Igoke Mustafa Fayad, sponsored by the Nigeria Police Force.
I am Dr. Bala Yusuf Yunusa, Senior Technical Advisor in the Office of the Senior Special Assistant to the President on Sustainable Development Goals, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Adebolaju Adeleke, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by the state government.
I am Colonel George Numegambadifo, Chairman, Study Group, sponsored by the Nigerian Army.
I am Dr. Oluwasegun Adewale of Shigibe, Director Research and Advocacy, sponsored by Manufacturers Association of Nigeria and the Chairman, Study Group 1.
I am Corps Commander Olusegun Adiola Ogunberide, sponsored by the Federal Road Safety Corps.
I am Chikodi Eminamon, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by Imo State Government.
I am Engineer Frank Kolawole, Director, sponsored by Ministry of Mines and Steel Development.
I am Controller Frank Amwane, sponsored by the Nigerian Immigration Service.
I am Colonel Abubakar Ali, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Mr. Stephen Abagi, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by the State Government.
I am Navy Captain Ahmed Ikulo, sponsored by the Nigerian Navy.
My name is Balaga Begum Osani, Professor of Internal Medicine and Cardiology, Ahmadu Bello University Zaire, sponsored by the National Universities Commission.
I am Rai Rashid Mohammed, sponsored by the
I am Commissioner of Police Suleiman Mohammed Akud, sponsored by Nigeria Police.
I am Engineer Professor Mohammed Sani Haruna, the immediate past Executive Vice Chairman, Chief Executive of the National Agency for Science and Engineering Infrastructure, NASENI, sponsored by the Presidency, specifically by the Office of His Excellency Vice President Yemi Osinbajo.
I am Commissioner of Police, Bernard Igwe, Security Officer of Force 45, sponsored by the Nigerian Police Force.
I am Dr. Hadi Balaya, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by
I am Mohammed Aliko Mohammed, sponsored by the Office of the National Security Advisor.
Dr. Baba David Danjuma, Rector, Vice Chairman, Study Group 3, sponsored by the National Board for Technical Education.
I am Assistant Commandant General Tamnawa, sponsored by Nigerian Security and Civil Defense.
I am Tunde Alau Ulaifa, Director, Strategy and Principal Investment, Legal Assurance, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Dr. Roslyn Igyo Iswagi, Fellow Security Institute, Director, sponsored by the Department of State Services and Chairperson, Study Group 3.
I am Adomo Lemu, Legal Practitioner, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Dr. John Koro, MD, sponsored by the Presidency. Thank you.
I am Father Bello Yahya Abbas, Assistant Rapporteur, Study Group 3, sponsored by the Nigerian Army.
I am Dr. Sarah Oga Aduari, Chief Executive Officer of the Amina Abu Foundation, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am David Captain, Commander of Honor, sponsored by the Office of the National Security Advisor.
I am Dr. Adebe Abiodun Awobotu, Council Member of ICANN, sponsored by the Institute of Chartered Accountants of Nigeria and the Treasurer of the Senior Executive Course 45 2023.
I am Dr. Gani Emahuru, veterinarian, Senior Advisor at Food and Agriculture Organization, United Nations, sponsored by the Presidency. I am Commissioner of Police, Ibrahim Abdullahi, sponsored by the Nigerian Police Force.
I am Samuel Agbelui, Vice President, sponsored by the Chartered Institute of Translation of Nigeria, and the Chairman of the Board.
Sponsored by the Nigerian Navy.
I am Dr. Abure Idris, Senior Fellow, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Controller of Customs, Babalafia Saadatu, sponsored by the Nigerian Customs Service.
I am Kilo Alajibukar, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by Yobe State Government.
I am Group Captain Raphael Kolade Olundu, sponsored by the Nigerian Air Force, Financial Secretary of Senior Executive Course 45.
I am Dr. Barrister Adeyemi Adedoyin. I'm a director sponsored by Federal Ministry of Agriculture and Rural Development.
I am Commissioner of Police, Shehu Managaga, sponsored by the Nigerian Police Force.
I am Omobolani Kalila Sadio, Director sponsored by the Defense Intelligence Agency.
I am Badal Aliyu Yusuf Nemekoma,
sponsored by Nigerian Army.
I am Dr. Saibo Philip, medical care physician from the State House Medical Center, sponsored by the State House.
I am Godwin Kinonso and the permanent secretary, sponsored by government of Enugu State government.
Manuel Director of Outreach, sponsored by
I am Patience Donju, permanent secretary, sponsored by Plateau State government.
I am Dr. Vitamin Basi, director sponsored by National Institute of Industry, Excellency.
I am Colonel Joseph Nanma Tahil, sponsored by the Nigerian Army.
I am Olayinka Aleto, Chief Executive Officer, United Pastoral Foundation, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Colonel Wale Donjo, sponsored by Nigeria.
I am Oladipo Israel Ogule, Chief Executive Officer from Olabi Farms and Agrarian Limited, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Dr. Abisola Sekina Adegoke, Director, Federal Ministry of Health, sponsored by the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation.
I am Commissioner of Police, Akinwale Kule Adeniran, sponsored by Nigerian Police.
I am Corporal Anthony Abakala, National President, National Union of Bank, Insurance and Financial Institution Employee, and OBK, sponsored by Nigerian Labour Congress.
Navy Captain Mailabaris Idu Solomon Kumu, sponsored by the Nigerian Navy.
I am Isi Oladewaju, permanent secretary, sponsored by the government of the state.
I am Group Captain Mohammed Farouk Kodbu, sponsored by the Nigerian Air Force, Chairman Study Group 5.
My name is Uchenna Unigwe, Executive Director of Nigerian Breweries PLC, sponsored by Manufacturers Association of Nigeria.
I am Jasper Osita Iduabuike, Second Deputy National President, sponsored by the Nigeria Association of Chambers of Commerce, Industry, Mines and Agriculture.
I am Colonel Oludare, sponsored by the Nigerian Army.
I am Sam Ifanikubu Hart, Director General, Abia State Marketing and Quality Management Agency, sponsored by the Presidency and the Secretary General, Senior Executive Post 45.
I am Group Captain Rashid Debaro Security, sponsored by the Nigerian Air Force.
I am Idris Shehukaya, Director, Office of the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, sponsored by the Office of the Head of the Civil Service of the Federation.
I am Dr. Masud Ahmed Kazori, a Director, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Colonel Murtala Njuma Abdusalam, sponsored by the Nigerian Army and Chairman, Study Group 6.
I am Professor Henry Abubo Okere, Professor of Pharmaceutical Chemistry, sponsored by the Pharmaceutical Society of Nigeria.
I am
I am Maiden Mohammed Shekhar, Permanent Secretary, sponsored by State Government.
I am Dr. Steve Olufemi Ojelani, Fellow Security Institute with Daga, a director sponsored by the Department of State Services.
I am Luza Ogomode, Ambassador sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And I am the Deputy Monitor General for the State Government.
I am Navy Captain Emmanuel Tamnosiki Fingezi, sponsored by the Nigerian Navy.
I am Samaila Muhammad Boni, Director, sponsored by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
I am Dr. Mrs. Adetayo Akintunde John Fishers, Fellow and Council Member, Nigerian Council of Registered Insurance Brokers, a Director sponsored by the Presidency, and Class 6 Treasurer. Thank you.
I am Commissioner of Police, Kwaji Yakubu Tibidani, also by the Federal Police Force.
I am Abubakar Musa, Director, sponsored by Ministry of Foreign Affairs.
I am Uchi Ede United, Barrister and the General Manager of Nigerian Social Insurance Trust Fund, sponsored by the Presidency, and the Legal Officer of the Senior Executive Course, Portugal.
I am Dr. Idabu Samuel Yemabu, Director, sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Special Duties and Intergovernmental Affairs. I am Dr. Mukhtar Yawada Mohammed, National Coordinator, Presidential Steering Committee on COVID-19, sponsored by the Federal Ministry of Health.
I am Commissioner of Police, Funsho Akeboyiga Eboyi, sponsored by the Nigerian Police Force.
I am Engineer Femi Omokunde, Director, sponsored by the Presidency.
I am Fortuna of Correction of Maiden, Fatih, sponsored by Nigeria Correctional Service. Director of Legal Services, sponsored by the Federal Judicial Service Commission.
I am Ahmad Bukai Khalid, General Manager, sponsored by NNPC.
I am Navy Captain Andrew Zidon, sponsored by the Nigerian Navy and sponsor of the Senior Executive Course 45.
I am Professor Francisca Abwa Iboka, sponsored by the National Universities Commission.
My name is Osius Animaji, Group Captain, sponsored by the Nigerian Air Force.
I am Oluroba Orimalade, Cadet Surveyor, as a Surveyor and Valor, Certified Facility Manager, sponsored by the Nigerian Institution of as a Surveyors and Valors.
I am Colonel Masiu Anide Ademola Adegobi, sponsored by the Nigerian Army and the Chairman, Structural Observer.
Your end of introduction of 97 distinguished participants of Senior Executive Course 45-2023. We now move on to the members of the faculty, starting with the members of the Research Directorate to introduce themselves. Members of the Research Directorate.
failed to remain the license fellow of the research directorate.
My name is Sylvester Samuel from the National Institute of Ethical.
Studies.
I am Islam Muhammad Bozi, Fellow Director of Study.
I am Dr. Theophilus Shesh, Senior Fellow, Research Director.
I am Dr. Razak Akapobi, Assistant Director of Programs, Director of Studies.
I am Dr. Gabriel Ibrahim Monitashi, Senior Fellow, Director of Studies.
Your Excellency, my name is Mrs. Olubumi Okoloda, Head French Union.
Dr. Solomon Wishlet, Senior Fellow, Research Director.
Dr. Washington Fellow, Research Director.
Dr. Wintaloke, Head of Department, Science, Technology, and Visual Studies, Directorate of Research.
SCP Umar, Head of General Administration, Directorate of Me.
My name is Barwa Bawi, I'm a research fellow at the Directorate of Research.
I am Oke Ubenu, Research Fellow, Directorate of Research.
I am Eze Uchenna Hygienist, Fellow, Public Affairs.
I am Maxa Khaled Tajan, Program Officer, Director.
I am Brigadier General Head Mohammed, Senior Defense Fellow, Research Department.
We now move on to the members of the directing staff. Members of the directing staff, please.
Excellency, sir, I'm Assistant Inspector General of Police, the Suki Nambopa Galadan PSC Daga MNI, the Director Staff. Welcome.
Your Excellency, sir, I am Commodore Suleiman Damo, MNI, duly appointed member of Directing Staff.
Your Excellencies, good afternoon, sir. I am Major General Emmanuel Boman Kabo, retired. Before my retirement in the year 2018, I was the General of Staff Commanding 82 Division of the Nigerian Army. I'm a member of the Director Staff.
I am Professor Eutapulu Steiner, member of the Directing Staff.
I am Professor Bolade Abidiji, member of the Directing Staff.
I am Professor Jane Andy, member of the Directing Staff.
I am Air Vice Marshal MC Ina, Directing Staff.
I am Air Vice Marshal E.D. Yingere, member of Directing Staff.
Ojuba Olu Olufunke Okome, Professor of Political Science, Directing Staff.
Nima Salman MNI, Directing Staff.
I am Ambassador Cyril Uchebuam, Directing Staff.
Your Excellency, I am Brigadier General S.O. Ubede Amina, member of the Directing Staff.
Your Excellency, I'm Brigadier General Deputy Nasser, Professor MNI, Director.
Your Excellency, sir, I will now introduce members of the management Also have Professor Dumbang Shah, the Director of Research. With us is Professor Funmilayo Paramala, MNI, the Director of Studies. She has the MBA of the National Institute. Christopher Omotayo, Professor of Environmental Sustainability, the Director General, National Institute for Policy and Strategy. Your Excellency, sir, these are members of your audience. To our esteemed audience, our eminent and esteemed special guest and resource person, all important event today is the Deputy Chief of Staff, Mr. Ade Ipaye, Order of the Federal Republic, and other members of the Vice President Entourage. You are most welcome. Your Excellency, sir, I will not also forget to introduce myself. I am Rear Admiral Adeshola Akonwo Adesokwe, MNI, the Monitor General for Senate Executive Course 37, 2015, and I'm a member of the directing staff. Your Excellency, sir, for me today is special because about 8 years ago, precisely on Saturday, 21st November 2015, you were the special guest of honor during the graduation ceremony for Senate Executive Course 37, 2015. And as the Monitor General, you were the one that decorated me with the yellow badge. At this juncture, I want to most respectfully invite the DG to please invite His Excellency and the Governor of Plateau State to the podium to come and take their seat before we take the goodwill messages. The DG, sir.
So every door I have to enter, I have to bend my head. And the first thing I did when I got to the institute was to ask that the door to my offices be changed from 6 feet 4 inches door to at least 7 feet door. I will have to bend for the 4 years that I'm here. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Our tradition in the institute is that we are greeted, we greet back. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Always remember that we have 2 certificates that we offer. We have 1 certificate and 1 badge. If you do well for the 10 months you are here, you will wear the yellow badge. And for some of us, we will go with the certificate of participation. It is your choice, whether you prefer the certificate or the yellow badge. I will take this as my welcome address. I would not want to belabor protocol. I've known the Vice President for a long time, and I'm sure you also have known him for a long time. We live in Plateau State. We are very familiar with the governor. We are familiar with his deputy. And now we are no strangers to Royal Father the Bongo. So I won't be going through all those again. But let me just say you are all welcome. It is heartwarming to welcome His Excellency Prof Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, the Vice President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, on behalf of the management, staff and participants of SEC 45-2023, to the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies here in Corridors. On this occasion of the Maiden lecture on policy making and good governance in Nigeria. The exact topic, the exact title of the Vice President's speech will be given later. The concept is novel in the annals of the National Institute, and this is the maiden edition of the lecture series. When the idea to introduce the series came up, the choice of who sets the pace for others to follow was not much of a problem. In consonance with the tradition of the National Institute, a list of best brains world over on the subject matter was drawn, and the first among equals was picked. This lecture, though an epoch-making event, should not be turned into a speech-making ceremony alone. Your Excellency, sir, permit me to say that through your actions, you have made it abundantly clear that the National Institute rating among the best 10 think tanks in the world is your pet project. You have done so much in this regard, giving us all the necessary support. We appreciate your efforts, and we know that to become one of the best 10 think tanks in the world requires a lot of work. So, Excellency, sir, we are still a work in progress. We are not where we want to be, but we believe we will get there. We therefore, sir, humbly request that your efforts and support towards the realization of this dream should stretch beyond your stay in office. You are an intellectual in government, and you have always thought that leaving lasting legacies for Nigeria as a nation to follow are more important to you than ordinary speech making. Given your credentials and experience, sir, the participants of SEC 45 2023, and in fact, all of us are anxious to learn at the master's feet. Considering your deep knowledge and vast experience on the subject matter, we are regretting ahead of time the time constraint, because in the Institute we do not allow any lecture to exceed 45 minutes. But we know that within the 45 minutes allotted for the lecture, you have the experience to deliver all that you want to say. Sir, we look forward to the next 45 minutes with excitement. You are welcome, sir. And may I choose this opportunity to invite both of you, Vice President and Deputy Governor, to please join us on this side of the house.
Seat, please. Next on the program is goodwill messages. So we take goodwill messages from our distinguished invited guests. Your Royal Majesty, sir, any goodwill messages?
President, Federal Republic of Nigeria, Excellency, Executive Governor of Plateau State, the DG NIPS. Let me say I feel privileged to come and listen to someone that you will never get tired of listening to. I want to say, with all sincerity, that NIPS has acquitted itself very well over the years. Achieving a lot more. We saw a dimension, another dimension to the current DG, and I want to believe from the applause that we have had in this, really, the participants are really appreciating it. We thank you for this series. We pray that Nigeria will change after this series, and because we are going to meet very serious recommendations. With this, I want to sincerely welcome you. Being the landlord of NIPS, I didn't have to come to NIPS. I hope my executive governor will appreciate it. You are welcome to Plateau State. We pray that God will continue to use you mightily in the growth of organization. Thank you and God bless you.
President of Nigeria, Your Excellency, the Governor of Plateau State, Your Royal Majesty, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am very glad to be here on behalf of the Alumni Section of the National Institute to commend the Vice President that within this period as the Vice President, NIPS has progressed tremendously. Thank you. I want to thank our host. I was here in 2007, almost 16 years ago, and we have always enjoyed the hospitality of the people of Plateau State. In my greater times, we now go to the DG. I was telling him over the text that he has brought in new and fresh ideas and perspectives within NIPS. Last time, it was the alumni service. Now, our very distinguished Vice President has kickstarted the policy making and good governance. Please, a round of applause. And for the new participants, you are very privileged. NIPS, when you pass through NIPS, we used to call ourselves Mafia Nigerian Cooperative. And I think from the last selection, chaired by the DG, you have been carefully picked. And we appreciate it that by the time you have gone through the crucible of NIPS for 10 months, you will come out better members of the Alumni Association. And I want to also thank the directing staff and the management of NIPS for keeping the flag flying. Today is a very important day in our life because of this new policy making and good governance. We thank you, our Vice President. God bless you, sir.
Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, GCON, Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. His Excellency, the Deputy Governor of Plateau State, Professor Sonny Kwanle Choden, Speaker, Plateau State House of Assembly, ably represented by the Deputy Speaker, Honorable Saleh Igmon. Chief Judge of Plateau State, also represented by Honorable Justice Ishaku Kunda, the Chairman and members of the Boards of Governors of the National Institute, the Director General, NIPS, Professor Ayo Omotayo, heads of military and paramilitary services present, APC Chairman, Honorable Rufat Badure, members of the Plateau State Executive Council, members of the State Security Council, Secretaries of the Government, Chief of Staff, and Head of Civil Service, the Chairman, Plateau State Council of Chiefs and Areas, and Bongo of Jos, His Royal Majesty, Dad Jacob Yang Buba, CFR, and other Royal Highnesses here, President and members of any participants of the Senior Executive Course number 45, 2023, the management and staff of the National Institute, distinguished invited guests, gentlemen of the press, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know whether to call myself a regular, an associate, a participant. Because I've been very, very regular here. So remember I said something, I said I will leave a signature. And that signature was to establish a golf course for the participants. It is because of creating that golf course, I captured somebody. I captured the DG himself. He's a member of the golf course. The only person I have not been able to, I tried, not yet succeeded, is Professor Paramalum. Very soon I told her husband she will join us on the golf course. So he's one person, and I know many of the management staff are now members of my club there. I will soon leave the office. I will join you every day in playing football. So it is another great honor for me to be here again at the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies and to deliver a goodwill message on the occasion of the Maiden Policy Making and Good Governance series. I welcome His Excellency the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, GCON, who is a guest lecturer and a frequent visitor to the Institute of Plateau State. I also take this opportunity to once again appreciate the Director General of the Management of the Institute for always coming up with novel ideas which stimulate discourse on critical and timely issues relating to the peace, progress, and the development of Nigeria. Plateau State, the home of peace and tourism, is indeed very proud to host these intellectual interactions which have impacted on the fortunes of our nation. I also pay my respect to the senior executive course 44 participants who I know are enjoying the beauty and hospitality of our state. Today's event, which heralds the Maiden Policy Making and the Good Governance Lecture series, is a well-conceived idea that addresses the long-standing challenge of the policy making and the delivery of people-centered governance in Nigeria. It is common knowledge that policy conception, articulation, and execution are some issues that have affected governance in Nigeria over the years. Policies are ordinarily supposed to be formulated on the basis of national or state aspirations and driven by concept of, quote, general good. Unfortunately, we have witnessed time and again where good policies are being either jettisoned or poorly executed in Nigeria on the basis of politics and other considerations that do not reflect the general interest. This situation has deteriorated over the years, particularly within our democratic experience, which continues to impact negatively on the slow level of development in virtually all sectors. It is sad to note that rather than focus on sustainable policies that drive national agenda and strengthen the Nigerian state, many office holders sacrifice this virtue on the altar of politics, which is sometimes motivated by parochial considerations, driven by ethno-religious considerations, amongst others. The resultant effect of this is the level of bad governance we continue to experience, where our people are denied the dividends of democracy and a better life. In order to make progress, this must change, especially as we are in another transition, where a new set of leaders are expected to take over soon. Our President, His Excellency Muhammad Buhari, GCFR, has in the last 8 years done his best in reviving some of the national policies across all sectors that are at the core of Nigeria's socio-economic development. It is expected that our President-elect, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, will continue to build upon these policies in a manner that emphasizes systems rather than personalities. Looking at the impact of the policies on agriculture, oil and gas, critical infrastructure, national security, power and energy, entrepreneurship and business, among others, which the Buhari administration has been scored high, there are very high expectations from the renewed hope agenda of the incoming administration, Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu. While I do not intend to encroach into the lecture, which is going to be delivered by my boss, by a very competent guest lecturer, who himself is an accomplished professor and politician, permit me to make a few references to how our rescue administration has tried to improve policy making and good governance in Plateau State over the past 8 years. One of the key areas my government has focused on is continuity in project implementation, which led to the completion of abandoned and inherited projects spanning from the immediate past administration and others before it. Rather than jettison such projects because of the party differences and other parochial considerations, we insisted in completing them for the interest of our people and in order not to waste public resources. Even though politicians have used this against us, we have no regret as we are sure that posterity will judge us whether rightly or wrongly. Today, many of them, including the famous Mararaban Jamal Secretariat Road, and others, have been completed and put to use, while others like the General Hospital in Kaite, Lankan South and Riom local government areas are among completed projects which will be commissioned by Mr. President when he visits Plateau State in the coming weeks. We believe that any policy that does not take into consideration the needs of the people is not worthy of consideration and implementation. It is my hope that this policy making and good governance lecture series will assist those coming into office at various levels to pay attention to what is important and urgent for the development of Nigeria. The time has come when we must distinguish politics from governance and ensure that we work together in delivering good governance to our people. All hands must be on deck. I welcome you once again, and I look forward to listening to our eloquent and brilliant guest speaker, the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, as well as the outcome of this lecture series. God bless Plateau State. God bless Federal Republic of Nigeria.
Permission of the Director General, I will now take the resume of the Vice President, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Grand Commander of the Order of the Niger. Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Grand Commander of the Order of Niger, is the Vice President of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. He was born on 8th of March 1957 at Creek Hospital, Lagos. Sir, I was also born in March. March 15 precisely. Professor Yemi Osinbajo is a professor of law and a senior advocate of Nigeria. He is married to Mrs. Oludolapo Osinbajo Nichoyede, granddaughter of the late sage and statesman, Chief Obafemi Awolowo. They are blessed with two children and a grandson. Now to the educational background of our Vice President. Professor Yemi Osinbajo had his primary and secondary education at Corona School, Lagos, and Igbobi College, Yaba, respectively. He was the winner of the State Merit Award in 1971, the School Prize for English Oratory 1972, and several others. A round of applause. So you know why everyone gets good presentation and good English. Queen's English, or King's English now. A round of applause for the Vice President. Thereafter, he studied for his undergraduate degree of the University of Lagos at the University of Lagos between 1975 and 1978, where he obtained a second-class upper degree in law. He also won the Graham Douglas Prize for Commercial Law. In 1979, he completed the mandatory one-year professional training at the Nigerian Law School, and thereafter, he was admitted to practice as a barrister and solicitor of Nigerian Supreme Court. In 1980, he attended the London School of Economics and Political Science, where he obtained a Master of Law degree. Next is to his professional life. Professor Yemi Osinbajo is an accomplished scholar, teacher, lawyer, and administrator. He is one of the nation's leading experts on the law of evidence, national and regional corporate commercial laws, and public law. A round of applause. Excellent. In 1994, he became Professor of Law, following which he was appointed Head of Department of Public Law, University of Lagos. Between 1999 and 2007, Professor Osinbajo was a member of Cabinet of the Lagos State Government, where he served as Attorney General and Commissioner of Justice. Also in 2007, His Excellency Professor Osinbajo became the senior partner at Simon Cooper Partners Nigeria, a commercial law practice. I will now move on to take a look at the political career of Professor Yemi Osinbajo. After the formation of All Progressive Congress, APC, Professor Yemi Osinbajo was tasked with other notable Nigerians in the party with the development of a manifesto for the new political party. The highlights of the roadmap included a free meal school plan and a conditional cash transfer to millions of the poorest Nigerians. On 17 December 2014, the presidential candidate of All Progressive Congress, retired General Muhammadu Buhari, announced Professor Osinbajo as running mate and vice presidential candidate for the 2015 general elections. The presidential ticket won the election and were both sworn in on the 29th of May 2015 for the first time. Similarly, in February 2019, the Buhari-Osinbajo ticket won the presidential election for a second term in office, starting from May 2019 till date. Now, to reform and charity work. While in public office as Attorney General of Lagos State, Professor Osinbajo is credited with undertaking far-reaching, significant judicial reforms. The reforms address critical areas such as judges' recruitment, remuneration, training, and discipline. In addition, he addressed access to justice for the poor by establishing appropriate institutions in the Office of the Public Defender, OPD, and the Citizens Mediation Center. He deserves a round of applause. Professor Yemi Osinbajo founded the Orderly Society Trust, OST, involved in an exile literacy program that aims to provide children in public primary school with the same level of training in English as available to the counterparts in private schools. Let's clap for this. On his 60th birthday, Professor Yemi Osinbajo launched the Learning Center in Borno State, an initiative of the Northeast Children's Trust. The Northeast Children's Trust is a private sector-led social engineering initiative incorporated in 2017 with a mission to create innovative, transformational, sustainable learning ecosystem that will nurture, renew, and empower vulnerable children between ages 5 and 18 years that have been orphaned by the insurgency in the Northeast Nigeria. This is another good. The Northeast Trust Fund has provided comprehensive support to 686 orphan and vulnerable children through accommodation, feeding, quality education, and rehabilitative psychological support. Over 1,000 students have directly benefited from the enhancements to educational infrastructure, including books, classrooms, information communication technology systems, and water sanitation and hygiene wash facilities, among others. Now, another special quality of His Excellency, and I can attest to this. He is an ordained pastor of Redeemed Christian Church of God. Sir, I am one of your workers and ministers. The Redeemed Christian Church of God, House of Prayer for All Nations, Holy Mission. I am in the Ocean Department, which is when the Vice President is coming to the church, you better not come late as workers. He goes round to check all of us. Sir, I cherish your rich and in-depth sermons. I also remember the way you go around to pray for all your workers. You normally come to the counting room to pray for us. Thank you very much. And I'm sure you still remember the sister Shike. She's in the children's party. That's my wife. Distinguished invited guests, participants of Senior Executive Course 45-2023, ladies and gentlemen, please let's welcome Professor Yemi Osinbajo, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and Grand Commander of Order of the
I have to say to the President that after many years of bullying me with his height, I introduced to him the DG, and he had to look up to greet me. And he commented that he's very tall. Thank you very much, DG, and thank you for the very kind invitation to be here for the Maiden Policy Making and Good Governance Lecture Series. Your Excellency, the Governor of Plateau State, and my serial host here, the Right Honorable Simon Bakolalo, Your Excellency, the Deputy Governor of Plateau State, Professor Sani Gwanle Toydin, and other members of the State Executive and Security Council present, the Speaker of the Plateau State Assembly, the Right Honorable Yakubu Sani, and other members of the State House of Assembly present, the Honorable Justice Ishako Kunda, who today represents the Honorable Chief Judge of Plateau State, Deputy Chief of Staff to the President, Office of the Vice President, Mr. Adeyemi, Chief of Defense Staff, represented today by the General Officer Commanding 3rd Armored Division, Nigeria Army, Major General Abdul Salam Ibrahim. Our dear host, the Director General of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, Professor Ayo Omotayo, Your Royal Majesty, the Bongo of Jos, and Chairman, Plateau State Council of Chiefs and Emirs, Dr. Jacob Gian Buba. The Vice Chancellor, University of Jos, Professor Tanko Ishaya, the management and staff of the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies, the participants of the Senior Executive Course 45 present. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me say before I begin that I very strongly believe in the National Institute for Policy and Strategic Studies. And I believe strongly in its capacity to be, in the coming years and months, the leading thought leader for Africa in policy matters, for Africa, not just for Nigeria, but for Africa. And I think that we have everything, course after course, and as has been pointed out, I've been coming here since 2015, and course after course, participants after participants. I'm completely overwhelmed by the quality of individuals, the quality of personnel who come here and who are trained in policy issues and who eventually go out there to influence policy one way or the other. So I hope that the 45 course participants for course 45 will join in this very noble, company. Thank you all very much. My topic is, I believe, has been displayed. It is, and I'll just to be sure that we have the topic, it is building or creating a homeland for all, creating a homeland for all, nation building in a diverse democracy, creating a homeland for all, nation building in a diverse democracy. And I want to just emphasize that the focus of my lecture will be on when I say diversity, I'm referring in particular to ethnic and religious diversity, and to see how it is that we can truly build a nation despite our ethnic and religious diversities. Let me begin with a personal story of an encounter that I had many years ago. In 1989, I was about to get married, and I was searching for a good place to rent, a good house to rent. I met my landlord-to-be, who happened to be an elderly lawyer, who obviously did more real estate than legal practice. I mean, he was mainly just business of real estate. So when I met him, he let me know that there were 3 categories of people that he would not rent his property to. Of course, he didn't know who I was. And the 3 categories of people that he would not rent his properties to were Igbos, Ijebus, and lawyers. Igbos, Ijebus, and lawyers. It was very clear to me. I was disqualified on 2 accounts. He then said to me, pointing behind him at a few shriveled-looking books in a small bookshelf behind him, that he had the arsenal to destroy any tenant in court if I gave him any trouble. He later on, of course, discovered to his embarrassment that I was a law teacher, and at the time advisor to the then Attorney General of the Federation, and of course, that I'm also Ijebu. I've shared this story to illustrate a point that I think is hugely important, which is that prejudice and bias are natural aspects of human nature. Everyone has prejudices and preferences that are reinforced by stories and narratives that they hear. Prejudice is a function of environment in which one is socialized and the level of exposure that one has. All across this country, different ethnicities are subjects of popular stereotypes, whether it is the notion that Ijebus are stingy, or that Igbos have an excessive love for money, or that the Fulanis are cunning, unforgiving, or more recently, violent, or that the Ibira and the Ika are practitioners of seasoned witchcraft. These are stereotypes, and they are, of course, by the very nature of stereotypes, wild generalizations, most likely to be false, and unlikely to hold up to any kind of empirical test. But they are the narratives people have woven about other tribes and, in fact, people of other religions. Sometimes these stories are repeated so many times that they are soon accepted as facts. And when we accept these stories as facts about other people, and people of other ethnicities and people of other religions, who we have never met with or interacted with, they shape our judgments about them even before they have spoken. In other words, we prejudge them. This is the nature and power of prejudice. This is how entrenched biases and prejudices come to be and become established. However, when ethnic or religious prejudices are weaponized for political purposes, we are confronted with a lethal, potentially destructive situations. Elections, for example, by their very nature, tend to be already divisive. Partisan democratic competition compels us to align ourselves with the camps that most reflect our ideals and aspirations. In a diverse society such as ours, democratic competition is intensified by the socio-cultural cleavages that exist in society. This is true of any heterogeneous society or democracy. In an election cycle in which the major contenders come from different ethno-regional classes or zones, there was always a sense that the competition was going to be particularly intense. But at the same time, it would not be accurate to reduce the election to an ethnic census. As we saw, the contenders performed strongly in parts of the country other than their native regions. Unfortunately, one of the unsavory tendencies that was witnessed in this election cycle, and has been so in previous ones, perhaps heightened somewhat, was the weaponization of ethnic, religious, and sexual prejudices in ways that are damaging to social cohesion. Religion was quite clearly made an issue, And in some parts of the country, political biases are introduced even between denominations of the same religion. In some cases, ethnic profiling took place at polling booths. There's a popular female food blogger and YouTuber called Prof Yemi, a Yoruba woman, who took to her verified Twitter handle to say, and I quote, "My husband and I were not allowed to vote. They said we look like Igbo people. I can't believe this," end of quote. Almost without fail, in every election cycle, politicians have forcefully, either overtly or covertly, sought to persuade voters that voting for their particular candidate or the particular political party they favor is the will of God, and that voting for the opposing party was a violation of the divine will. Repeatedly, we hear prophets who support political parties, one way or the other. This is a matter of great concern because long after an election is over, and long after the leading contenders have sheathed their swords, the rhetoric, the words, and the means used to compete can have adverse long-term effects on society. Where the forces of primordial division and polarization are harnessed for the sake of electoral gain, the venom of such devices remain and continue to poison communal relations, setting neighbors against neighbors. And we have witnessed the catastrophic consequences of the political weaponization of prejudice and bias in places such as Rwanda. No one could have believed that in a small country with two ethnic groups, the Hutus and the Tutsis, who speak the same language, that ethnic sentiments will be exploited to the extent that it set both groups against each other and led to the Rwandan genocide in which 1 million people died. In that conflict, people who had lived together side by side for years were set upon by their own neighbors and murdered in the most gruesome fashion. Even in our own history as a people, there are ample milestones that serve as a warning against indulging in bigotry and prejudice. Some of the political rhetoric that we've heard in the course of this election cycle have been disturbing because they recall similar rhetoric used by politicians during some of the darkest chapters of our country's existence. In the First Republic, the exploitation of prejudice and incitement of hatred against ethnic communities led to the collapse of that democratic dispensation, led to bloody pogroms, and a civil war that cost in excess of 2 million lives. We talk about the civil war, but we seem to ignore the fact that it was the manipulation of ethno-religious sentiments that eventually boiled over into that tragedy. The demons released by that bloody conflict amongst brothers against the use of ethnically or religiously charged rhetoric and a raft of laws that criminalize divisive attitudes and behavior. We also must do the hard work of providing and implementing a framework for fair, just, and unifying dealings amongst our peoples. We must also create a framework that enables us to be able to enforce strictly the laws against the use of divisive rhetoric, especially ethnically bigoted or religiously bigoted rhetoric. Let me be clear. People do not suddenly start hating each other during elections. While political actors may invoke ethnic or sectional sentiments in an election, these social and cultural antipathies already exist, lurking beneath the surface. And as we reflect on the takeaways from the last election cycle going forward, we must consider the prevalence of ethnic profiling and other forms of day-to-day discrimination that occur. We must consider the various forms of bigotry and prejudice that are not only present in our politics, but are transmitted and effectively mainstreamed by the media and other social forces. The association of whole ethnic communities with certain types of criminality, which amounts to wholesale criminalization of an identity and the habit of tarring groups with the misdeeds of individuals, are deeply problematic. if we normalize these attitudes and habits, it should not surprise us that they come to the fore during a heated electoral campaign. And I must say, just for emphasis, that when a group of people, or when individuals, no matter how many they may be, do certain things, it is so easy for us to simply criminalize an entire tribe of people because of the actions of a few. And we have done this kind of profiling in so many different ways, such that if you ask anyone who is doing this, you will say, oh, it's people of this tribe. Who is doing that? It's people of that tribe. But the vast majority of the people of that tribe do not even know that such things exist. So these kinds of ethnic profiling is dangerous, and it has to be contained. And it has been contained in other places. And I'm sure that part of what part of the policies that I hope will develop from here will be studying these other societies that have been able to contain ethnic profiling in a way that it is done, in a way that is so destructive to our communities. But believe it or not, Nigeria is changing. There are no longer any ethnically homogeneous enclaves in Nigeria. As our own nations have evolved, one of the most desirable changes that we've witnessed is the disappearance of ethnically homogeneous spaces. Everywhere across the country, people from diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds are schooling together, doing business together, commingling, intermarrying, and raising families. Our much talked about linguistic diversity is not a barrier, as many Nigerians are multilingual. Increasingly, we see that the heart and face of a new Nigeria is a socio-cultural hybrid, appreciative of the cultural diversity of our society, attuned to its culture, but also blessed with an inclusive cosmopolitan outlook. For many of these Nigerians, young Nigerians in particular, their ethnic and national identities are not in contradiction. For young Nigerians who belong to the most globalized generation in our country's history, this is especially true. Their friendships, their education, their lived experiences have brought them into contact with a favorable variety of identities and cultures in their society and on the planet. And we see their multicultural outlook in the social networks, in their entrepreneurial partnerships, and their political activism, which transcend the old primordial allegiances. And we saw a lot of that in the politics of this particular election cycle. A lot of the young people simply chose how they wanted to vote. And many of them disregarded old primordial allegiances. They disregarded in many cases tribe. It's not only intentional migration, by the way, that diversifies our communities. Over the past 3 decades, conflicts and climatological events have also diversified. For instance, floods, droughts have displaced large populations of our people, driving them from their traditional homesteads in search of survival and safety. And so they take refuge in safer communities, they plant roots there and make those places their new homes. And this is one of the engines of change that has become transformative for our communities and neighborhoods. And there's really nothing intrinsically wrong with this, because in any event, this is how nations evolve. All Nigerians are guaranteed the right to freedom of movement by the Constitution. However, as human societies have evolved, there was a realization that prosperity and progress lay in the widening cycle of inclusion and broadening of our definitions of sameness. Tribes have given way to nations, and along with this, new forms of socio-political organizations, more expansive interpretations of kinship have emerged. A common citizenship based on a cosmopolitan worldview has become the standard for societies across the world. Discrimination against people on the basis of their identity is explicitly condemned by most legal codes, including our own Constitution. But there is still a tension that exists between this new Nigeria and the old Nigeria, as understood by a generation that is much more accustomed to political mobilization on the basis of identity. But we must ennoble and validate the Nigeria that our young people are consciously, or sometimes even unconsciously, building. This is the future that we want. But as human beings, it's natural to react to changes in the environment with some degree of anxiety. For many Nigerians, as we witness, our communities become more diverse and more complex. There are natural concerns about what this means for our own societies, what this means for our own homes. These elections witness the exploitation by political actors of the fears and anxieties of people about so-called outsiders. Any attempt to deny people the right to vote in any locality on the basis that they do not belong in that place is condemnable in the strongest terms. Social integration is one of the highest ideals of our Constitution, which guarantees every citizen the right to traverse the length and breadth of this country without hindrance and to settle in any place of their choice. It affirms the right of all Nigerians not to be discriminated against on the basis of their identity. Above all, it holds up integration as a priority. The framers of our Constitution did not intend to create an apartheid system that distinguishes between natives and settlers, nor did they in fact create one. They sought to create a civic nation. So it is possible to conquer ethnic or religious prejudice and build a unified nation. And I think that in itself should be a rhetorical question. Can we truly conquer ethnic prejudices, religious prejudices, and build a unified nation? I think we can. But it's a journey, it's not an event. And it's perhaps the most important issue in nation building. Indeed, as humanity sought to build a more durable, just, and sustainable civilization, we learned that our natural prejudices and our allied irredentist urges have to be disciplined and sublimated in a mutually rooted, shared humanity. We cannot without discipline. Some of the discipline comes by the force of law. We simply have to discipline our natural urges. There's a recognition that socio-cultural diversity, while being a fact of life, is neither a weapon nor a weakness. And the most prosperous places on the face of the earth are places that have learned to harness diversity while building even more inclusive institutions. Singapore and Tanzania are countries that have gone far in conquering prejudice, and I've mentioned earlier Rwanda. In Singapore, the statesman, Lee Kuan Yew, promoted policies aimed at establishing social cohesion in a racially and ethnically heterogeneous nation. Among such initiatives was the ethnic integration policy, which sought to prevent the formation of ethnic conflicts and to promote the integration of minority groups. It specified the proportion of flats that could be owned by the various ethnic groups, and this created a much more balanced ethnic mix in the various housing estates that were built in Singapore. Singapore made English the official language, established legislative and policy safeguards to guarantee the rights of minorities and to ensure that government does not pass laws that overtly or covertly discriminate against any race or religion. Lee Kuan Yew's government also entrenched meritocracy as its dominant public philosophy. In 2019, the Gallup World Poll, Singapore was rated top out of 124 countries for tolerance of ethnic minorities, and 95% of respondents stated in that survey that for racial and ethnic minorities, Singapore was a good place to live. This was higher than the global average of 70%. Tanzania is another example of a country that has been able to effectively manage its diversity. Its founding president, Julius Nyerere, wanted to avoid tribal prejudice that had plagued other African countries and implemented 3 measures. It promoted an overarching national identity by establishing Kiswahili as national language. Second, it promoted a pan-Tanzanian history, a deliberate writing of history, which introduced into primary school curriculum, which taught children to see themselves, first and foremost, as Tanzanians. In doing this, he was not attempting to erase ethnic identities, but to ensure that ethnic prejudices did not blossom. And he achieved this aim of making Tanzanian citizenship the primary way in which Tanzanians saw and identified themselves. Nyerere was also a sincere preacher of national unity and coexistence. I believe that Nigeria is neither unique nor exceptional on account of her diversity. The genre of scholarship and public polemic that makes a problem of our country's profusion of ethnicities and religions and characterizes it as a profound flaw is one that I differ strongly with. I very strongly differ that merely because we are ethnic nations that came together or that we are from different religions, for that reason it is necessarily a huge problem that is insurmountable. Our diversity is neither a liability nor a curse. It is in fact a blessing and an asset. Diversity deepens the pool of socio-cultural capital available to us. We're enriched by the fully ferment of the vast multiplicity of perspectives which provide us with a treasure of tools for growth and progress. And I've long maintained that in Nigeria, what is at issue is not, and has never been, our diversity, but our capacity to manage with a sense of fairness, equity, and justice. There's no denying that diversity can be a harbinger of friction, and we've seen it anyway, so often. It's natural. As different groups from various backgrounds and with different worldviews mingle, their interaction is characterized by a degree of tension and even conflict. All diverse nations find their unique ways of managing the tensions which inevitably arise from the co-mingling of an assortment of people. And let me add that inclusion is essential to prosperity. As we go forward, there is another reason, this is another reason why divisive politics is completely counterproductive. Over the past 5 decades, we have sustained a political economy in which our crude oil wealth, extracted at considerable cost to the Niger Delta, has been the fuel of economic and administrative life of our country. In recent years, it has become clear that we are now entering a post-oil age. Whether we like it or not, with all the developments in the world, and all the talk about energy transition and all the talk about renewable energy, whether we like it or not, we are certainly entering a period when oil is going to grow in irrelevance. Our developmental and growth aspirations cannot be centered around the distribution of rents of oil. We have realized what the advanced economies have long recognized. In the 21st century, the true wealth of nations is human capital. And this means that places that have learned to attract and retain the most diverse pool of capital, or skilled capital, easily win the race for success. Diversity means a multiplicity of perspectives and worldviews, but this also provides a broad range of cultural, philosophical, and intellectual approaches for solving problems. In this rich soil, nourished by various ideas and schools of thought, productive synthesis is possible and innovation flourishes. The world's richest nations are those places that have learned to attract talent from various places and to harness diversity as a driver of growth. In Nigeria, this will also increasingly be the case. A state's chances of growth will depend on how much qualitative capital it can attract, and the richer human capital pool at its disposal, the more taxes it can harvest to fund governance and social services. In this scenario, the politics of division and tribalism will only breed poverty because it can only alienate the human capital that a state desperately needs for its growth. It will be counterproductive and destabilizing to exclude Nigerians from the political life of their communities on the basis of where they come from, while simultaneously expecting them and requiring them to pay taxes. Taxation without representation is clearly a recipe for instability. There are, of course, some issues that should focus all our commitments. affirming the right of Nigerians to be free of all forms of discrimination. It's not just a moral idea. If we are truly committed to economic growth, then we must also be committed to creating inclusive communities and strengthening social cohesion. Put another way, the only thing that grows in a climate of tribal hatred is poverty. This is why justice and healing and a stronger commitment to the ideals of integration are so important. Let me just very quickly return to the issue of elite responsibility. Leadership does not today, and Nigerian leadership today, does not have the luxury of toying with prejudice. The leadership elite, and when I refer to the leadership elite, I refer not just to the political elite, I refer also to the religious elite and to the business elite. We have a duty to conduct ourselves with a high sense of responsibility, even as we prosecute the contest for power. Historically conscious and patriotic elites all over the world recognize that beyond the letter of the law, beyond what the law has set, there are lines that must not be crossed in the pursuit of political power, especially in fragile society and democracies such as ours. One of such lines is the willful exploitation of sectional sentiments and the invocation of ethnic antipathies to mobilize a political constituency. It is dangerous because it's an attempt that seeks to mobilize by fostering division and hatred. And when the elite fail to compete responsibly and moderately, they foster a sense that everything goes and all of that can only breed instability. We have seen this dynamic play out time and time again in our history. The model of competition that recognizes no ethical limits or boundaries is a threat to our democracy, is a threat to the well-being of our country. It's incumbent upon politicians and the leadership elite to act and conduct competition responsibly. In all the countries that have been relatively successful in the journey to overcoming prejudice, such as the examples I've given of Singapore and Tanzania and Rwanda that I've just talked about, leadership has been critical. Responsible leadership, the responsible leadership elite has been critical. The elites of both countries recognize, or those three countries recognize, that cohesion and peaceful existence have to be intentionally prioritized and pursued. It is not a side agenda. It's not a side issue. For these countries that have succeeded so far, they did not consider cohesion a side issue or just something we talk about. They took deliberate steps from policy to implementation. This is the challenge of leadership in our own country today. And it's a challenge that our leadership elite face. Elites have a responsibility to discipline themselves first and foremost in the pursuit of political ambitions and the exercise of power to ensure that the fabric of our communities is not rent asunder. We must recognize that if peaceful coexistence is sacrificed on the altar of partisan politics, then all will be lost. We've spoken about the need for politicians to act responsibly. But that burden is also on what is called the third sector, civil society, including and perhaps especially the media. The media has a twofold responsibility. As an institution that is uniquely influential in shaping public perceptions and attitudes, it has to be extremely mindful of what sort of narratives it is projecting and how it frames disputes, especially in multicultural and heterogeneous contexts. There are also a number of measures that we must consider as we attempt to chart a way forward. First, justice is necessary. Where crimes have been committed, they must be stringently prosecuted. We know that political actors, for example, before these elections, signed a peace accord on the eve of the elections under the auspices of the National Peace Committee. One point of action is for us to assess the extent to which the actors complied with the undertakings to which they freely committed during the signing of that pact. And perhaps it's just, even if it's just to inquire, to find out to what extent was there compliance. And it might be the role of small study groups to look at it. To what extent are these peace accords relevant? To what extent are they useful? To what extent are they compliant? And what do we need to do to make them even more effective? More broadly, the government has a responsibility to resolutely affirm the rights of all Nigerians to pursue their lawful business and be free from discrimination wherever they live in their country, and to repudiate the idea that there is a hierarchy in which some Nigerians may become second-class citizens. There's absolutely nothing in our constitution that supports the idea that Nigerians are barred from participating in public life or seeking political office because they allegedly do not belong to or do not belong in the places where they reside. And we must reject any hint of this, precisely because Nigerians are everywhere across this nation. The people that are most discriminated against in our nation are those that are referred to as non-indigenous, wherever they may live in our country. And yet many of us are non-indigenous in some way or the other. It makes no sense to exclude so many Nigerians from the public life of their communities in which they reside, and to which they are contributing, many on account of the fact that they are considered settlers or non-indigenous. Incidentally, from the earliest days of the Republic, Nigerians of various ethnic extractions have sought and won political office outside their natal regions. The first mayor of the Enugu Municipal Council was Umaru Altan, a Fulani cattle dealer who held the position between 1952 and 1958. We have since had similar examples in our democratic practice. So we must dismiss the idea that these things are impossible. Let me conclude with another personal story. On the 16th of July 2022, I went in for a surgery on my right femur at a hospital in Lagos. As I lay on the operating bed and I was about to be anesthetized, full anesthesia, which will put me out completely, and I'll be completely unconscious for the 3 hours or so that the operation will take. Just before I lost consciousness, a thought crossed my mind that I would be absolutely at the mercy of these surgeons and paramedics and anesthesians who surrounded the bed that I was lying on. It struck me that I had actually allowed these people to take over my life, and I had to entrust them with my life. One of them was from the southeast, the head of the team was from Delta, some were Muslims, some were Christians, some were from the north, some were from the south. In fact, I suspect that one of them, who I spoke to later, did not even believe in God. Yet, as I lay on that bed, it didn't seem to matter where they came from, because they were experts. When we make the decisions that affect our lives, and the decisions that affect our children the most, somehow we're able to ignore tribal or religious prejudices. The pilots who flew our planes, or who fly our planes, in fact, the pilots about a couple of weeks ago, I was flown to Lagos by 2 female pilots. So for those amongst my team who discriminate against women, they were left entirely in the hands of these 2 ladies. We don't complain about the pilots who fly our planes. As a matter of fact, I said once that if I was told, as I entered one of the presidential planes, if I was told that the reason why the pilot was selected was because it's from Kenya, my hometown, I'll go down and go back to my office and wait until they can find a competent pilot from anywhere in Nigeria. I will not insist that you come from my hometown. The teachers who teach our children in school, we don't necessarily ask where they're from so long as they're good teachers. The soldiers and other law enforcement agents who put their lives on the line for our safety every day, we don't ask them where they're from, so long as they can do a good job. Even the members of our national football team, we don't care if all of them are called Osinbajo, so long as they can score. We don't care where they're from, and we don't ask those questions.
This is the attitude that we must adopt always to build the nation of our dreams. Mobilizing the people of a country as complex and as heterogeneous as ours, under the banner of a common purpose, was never going to be an easy task. But that's not to say that it's impossible. Let us never forget that although we may speak different languages, and belong to different tribes, and profess diverse creeds, we are bound by a shared language and a shared hope, by our common humanity as Nigerians, and a supreme faith in all of the possibilities that lie in our country. Thank you very much for listening.
Once again, a round of applause for His Excellency, Professor Yemi Osinbajo, LCN GCON, on that topic, creating a homeland for all nations living in diverse democracy. Let's give him a resounding round of applause. Moving on, sir. It's now time for the interactive section. With the kind permission of the DG. So we are now in the interactive session. And I will take questions from all the study groups. Your Excellency, I have 7 study groups. So,
considering several narratives vis-a-vis the lecture delivered on creating a homeland for all, one can conveniently say that Nigeria as a country has never been bereft of policies and socio-economic and political policies that would have transformed the country have been formulated. Sir, coming from the nucleus of power, what will you say is the main reason why Nigeria's prejudices refuse to die over such a long period of time, as exemplified by the recent occurrence of the NSAS protest, the several fragmentations around ethnic and religious lines as regards to our voting system, as well as the dispositions of our prophets and imams along voting line? Thank you, sir.